The following broadcast is intended for mature audiences. These are real people sharing very real, deeply personal experiences. This content may be considered triggering for others and for those who are sharing. The chat room is a privilege intended for discussions and sharing. You are not being asked to agree, but you are being asked to stay civil and refrain from personal attacks. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back to Am I Mental, a weekly podcast where real people share real stories about living lives with mental health issues and life issues that impact mental health. I am your host, E. With us, as always, is the co-host, Bexy.
Hello, everyone.
And tonight is going to be a really good episode. Our guest, actually his story resonates in a lot of parts with me. I think this is going to be more of a return to our more serious episodes. Of course, there's going to be a little goofing off. We always do. We can't help it. But we're going to be definitely a lot more in line with how we started out. But before we start, if you want to help us out, if there's any episodes that have resonated with you or you think might resonate with someone else, please share. That's the best way you can help us. We've been accredited with saving at least one life so far. We'd love to be able to save more. And if you want to help us beyond that, you can also go to amimental.net/donate. There are a number of ways to donate. And where we say that we have a Teespring store, that actually is a link to take you to the Teespring store where you can go ahead and buy t-shirts, hoodies, tote bags, stickers, face masks, whatever. And if there's any products that you would like to see, go ahead and message us. Go ahead and message us at guest@amimental.net. Without further ado, let's welcome Andy on the show.
Hey, everybody. My name's Andy. I'm on tonight to talk about, I guess, whatever emerges. But the primary issue for me is I'm kind of a middle-aged guy. I'm 48, and I lived with mental health issues without even knowing. I knew I had my struggles. I felt like I was always on the verge of losing my mind. It wasn't until a couple of years back that I discovered the concept of complex PTSD. A few years before that, I had a therapist in couples counseling mention that she thought that maybe I struggled with PTSD from the abuse I suffered from my brother. And I kind of blew it off because a lot of people kind of tend to downplay their own trauma. But especially if you think about PTSD, you think of people in war and seeing somebody getting their head blown off, et cetera, et cetera. So I didn't really take it too seriously until I encountered Pete Walker's stellar book, Complex PTSD. And as soon as I heard the list of symptoms, it described struggles that I've had throughout my entire life. And it was pretty ground shaking. But even before that was the concept of childhood emotional neglect. So I think both of those issues are kind of what we could consider invisible mental health issues. We often think of trauma as the overt abuse of people who have experienced sexual abuse, physical abuse, even emotional abuse. But neglect is also devastating consequences. In my case, I dealt with the childhood emotional neglect. Both of my parents had grown up with severe trauma. They were great parents, though, otherwise. People from the outside would see a stable home and then wondered why me and all my siblings were constantly in and out of jail, in fights in school, drug issues, things like that. I was the least problematic of my siblings, but I had my own issues.
Right.
Now, so
out of curiosity, what guided you to find that book,
Sure.
The Complex PTSD? I'm curious because you've mentioned it in the pre-show, and I wanted to say that. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, so fortunately, the therapist, like I said, had mentioned PTSD, but I've never heard of the concept of complex PTSD. And I was actually just looking for an audio book to play through Hoopla. I don't know if people are familiar with Hoopla and Libby, but a lot of libraries offer you memberships through both apps, so you can find tons of audiobooks. And I put in, I think, mental health or something kind of generic, and I stumbled on that. And it sounded intriguing because I knew what PTSD was, but I didn't know what complex PTSD was. So I actually just started playing the audiobook while walking my dog. And that's when I had the biggest breakthrough of my life and understanding why I'd felt like I was constantly on the verge of losing my mind my whole life and struggle with all kinds of other issues.
So one really quick technical thing. Right now, unlike last night, tonight we're actually having a little bit of audio issues. Can you turn off your camera and let's just do audio only, see if that helps out. It's
Sure.
not too bad, but it's just a little bit.
Okay.
Perfect. So yeah, and you were saying that you were the least problematic of your siblings, but you did have your own issues.
Yeah, well, I've had like a lot of issues that I struggled with, but I think part of the thing is that I was very good in school and I was really committed to that. But there were like weird things about me. Like I was terrified of rejection from somebody I was attracted to my whole life. So I didn't really date until I was like in my early 20s, even though there were people who I was attracted to that in retrospect were kind of opening the door for me to act on that. Kind of anger at inanimate objects, like my bike. I would put it up on the kickstand, it would fall over and I'd start throwing it down and cursing at it. Like really bizarre things like that. I would look at it in retrospect and be like, what the hell is that? But I never had anger issues with people. I wasn't a violent person. But it was really, and then through high school, I had skateboarding. So in addition to being successful in school, I skated a lot. And I think that alleviated a lot of my stress and anxiety. It wasn't until I kind of went through a third life crisis in my early 20s when grad school fell apart, my first marriage fell apart, and kind of was dealing with issues of politics that were upsetting to me, that anxiety manifested when I was like in my early 20s. So I didn't really know that I had issues, throughout that time up until the anxiety started to manifest and all the things that came with that.
Got it. So you did talk about that in the pre-show. You did talk a little bit about how you found that not only does this whole the complex PTSD, how it's been impacting you, but you also mentioned that it's also a lot like that is very relatable with your students, since you're also a teacher.
Right. Yeah. So it was pretty timely for me to come across it because I've been a teacher in the Philadelphia school district since 2005. And kids in Philly have very, very significant challenges. And I'd studied psychology in undergrad. I came into it with a special emphasis on the kids' psycho-emotional issues. I got designated a math teacher, even though I don't really care about math, because I came through Teach for America and that was what was needed. And I was capable of teaching it. So I actually looked at my math students as being coming into the classroom traumatized, and saw their experience as traumatic in the classroom, but also knew that they had major. In the most recent position I've had over the past 3 years, I teach at a school that serves kids in foster care. So not only do they have the stresses and the challenges that a lot of kids in Philadelphia have, but then they've been through the foster care system. and many of them have lived lives that I would consider almost horror stories. They're totally heart-wrenching. So that, as I was using the concepts to reflect on my own experience, I was simultaneously thinking about how it applies to my students' lives. And I actually put together a presentation for my colleagues to share with them, because what's so insightful about it is everybody knows about the fight or flight notion.
Right.
But what really incredible about it is it's rooted in this concept called polyvagal theory. And polyvagal theory is the idea is that we have in our nervous system this vagal nerve, and it goes all throughout our body. And what happens is that when we feel threatened, our nervous system responds before our brain does. And the problem, I think, for educators like myself and my colleagues, and really our society in general, is we often think of mental health issues as being rooted in the mind. And that's somewhat incorrect. Looking at polyvagal theory, we come to understand that our nervous system actually reacts before our brain ever does, and our brain reacts before our body does. So it's not always about the thoughts that we're having and our conscious reactions to sensory inputs. It's that our nervous system, they actually talk about, instead of perception, which is rooted in the mind, they talk about neuroception. That's where your nervous system is perceiving threats before your mind even does. And so when your nervous system responds to those threats, and if you've had early trauma and your whole development has been around that trauma, you're oversensitive to those stimuli. And so you're often thrown into that nervous state of fight, flight, and then even beyond that, when you lose all hope, that's when you go into freeze mode, like deep depressions. So you're already in the state where your brain is automatically already going to perceive things entirely differently and respond to them entirely differently, because your nervous system has shifted you into that state. And then the parts of your brain that have to do, that are more reptilian and very early on in our development as a species, they're acting, and not what we consider human behaviors, which happens in the prefrontal cortex.
Right. I mean, this almost sounds a little bit like epigenetics as well. Like, his experiences could cause different genes to express and certain genes to stop expressing.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like there might be a tie there.
Yeah, true.
I bring that up because one of I
haven't looked into that much.
Oh, go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say that is something I'll have to look into more. It's something I've seen a little bit about, but don't know much about.
Yeah, so we've had discussions in the past about epigenetics, largely due to the fact that we do have a therapist that comes on fairly regularly. She hasn't been able to the last couple seasons. Her name is Rachel Conway, and she does a lot of the integrated family systems for the model of therapy she goes for, and it also touches heavily on, or not necessarily heavily, but it also touches upon epigenetics. A really good experiment that I mentioned is that they did an experiment with rats where they exposed them to the exact chemical that creates the smell of an orange. And what they would do is that they had like 100 male rats, 100 female rats, and every time that the rats sensed that smell, they would administer a slight electrical shock to make them uncomfortable, feel a little bit of pain. And it got to the point where if they even got a whiff of that scent, they would panic. Now, what was interesting is that when they bred these rats, they went ahead and took 50 of those male rats, or they split them up where they also had control groups, and then they did like some of the males and some of the females that were exposed to that therapy, they were allowed to breed. They did some where it's just the males with the control group, and then with females with the control group, and of course control to control, to see if it got passed on. Every offspring from the male rats that had been exposed to that orange scent and got a shock, all of their offspring panicked at the scent of an orange. None of the offspring from the females that did not mate with those males responded at all. And then as they did it just through generations, they found that it was attached to the Y chromosome, and that was the epigenetics part of it. So every male rat of that gene line that they exposed to, all of their offspring would freak out. But even the females that would freak out would breed with a regular control rat, and none of their offspring would have it at all. It just followed the male lines as far as who spreads it. And that's a good introduction to epigenetics.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I could definitely see the connection there. So, for me with the school, trauma informed school. So what's really special about it is we have equal staff in the socio-emotional learning department as we have in the educational academic side. What I feel like we need more of is the training of the students, because I don't think that they know, just like I wasn't aware of how much my trauma had influenced my behaviors and my decisions and my emotion, the challenges that I had socially and emotionally. I think that to them can help them better understand why they're reacting in such a way to and end up deciding so they can make better decisions in response to those the neuroceptions of threat.
Right. So just to kind of put it in perspective, like you said that it was your older brother that basically, for lack of a better way of putting it, he gave you CPTSD. Like, what kind of stuff did he do? I don't want to go into too much detail if we don't have to, but I mean, just to kind of get an example of what could give it.
Yeah. It was all physical and psychological abuse. It wasn't sexual abuse, but I'll tell you the bookends, and then you can fill in the gaps in between. So he's 2 years older than me. I've always kind of been slight build. He's always been a little bit bigger. So, bigger in stature naturally, and then 2 years older. So he was 6 and I was 4. And I still remember the whole situation vividly. We were playing a game. We were constantly stuck playing together because my mother was a stay-at-home mother. She had I had 2 younger siblings. So she was doing housework and tending to 2 younger kids. Dad was often away. So I was often stuck with me and my brother playing. We were playing a game in our basement, and it was some game we made up. We were throwing a ball off the wall and had to catch it. Somehow, we had some point system we invented. He did this throughout our lives. He would constantly change rules to favor himself. And so this particular game, something happened. He changed the rules. And I said, I don't want to play anymore. I started to go up the steps of the ground floor, and he chased after me. And he also has a kind of narcissistic rage. Anytime you contradict him or don't do what he wants, like flushed red face and immediately turns violent. So he chases after me angry. So I start running. Yeah. Which is terrifying. You're 4 versus a 6-year-old,
Right.
It's only 2 years, but at that age, so much larger. So I'm running away from him, trying to get to my dad, who's a couple rooms away, and he gets behind my back. So he's got my arms held up backwards behind me, and my dad's in front of me, and my dad like I said, with the childhood emotional neglect, he always failed to protect me. In this instance, he was changing to get ready to go to a second job. He refereed basketball games. He was changing. He was a room in front of me. I could see him with my eyes, and he wasn't responding at all. So I yelled to him. I said, "Dad, tell him to let go of me." And he says, "You tell him to let go of you." So I turned to my brother. I said, "Let go of me." He won't. So I yell at my dad again. He's not listening. So he says, "Stacy, let go of him right now." So he hooked his leg in front of my legs with my arms pulled behind my back. So I fell face first into a wood floor and shattered my nose.
Ouch.
So blood started gushing out of my nose, broken nose. My dad runs over and cupped his hand under my nose, and it was pouring so profusely that it filled his whole hand and was spilling over the sides.
Head wounds, man.
Squealing
Oh
in
my
pain.
goodness.
Yeah. And to be 4 and maybe have had scratches, and now like I have a puddle of blood pouring out of my own face. So my, I'm obviously in shock, and all my dad said was, "Look what you did." And then they took me to the hospital. I ended up having to get a cast on my nose as a 4-year-old. So I had to go to preschool with a cast on my nose. But there was never any consequences for him. My parents never brought me home and said, "We're sorry that happened. We're going to protect you." My dad never said, if he's acting in this way in the future, you talk to me. The rest of my life, he still would anytime I had a complaint about something my brother was doing, it was you deal with it. So I very quickly had to internalize that I just had to deal with the abuse. Other times it was more like psychological, like we were playing out in the backyard and we had a wagon full of like baseball bats and balls and gloves, and we're bringing it in, and I think I tipped it over, or it tipped over accidentally, and then he said, "Now you got to put everything back in the way it was." I don't know how old I was at this point. It was probably maybe 5 or 6, so he was like 7 or 8, and I put everything in. He said, "No, that's not right." And I went through this for like, multiple iterations, and he kept on threatening me, if you don't fix it, I'm going to whoop your ass. So I'm to the point of like breaking down.
I mean, is it really a big deal that everything's put back right? If everything's put away and it looks nice, should be fine. It sounds like he was just doing it just to be a dick.
Absolutely. Like I said, he was a narcissistic, controlling, like just a vile, horrible human being. And he just thrived on being domineering and with the threat of violence, because he knew there wasn't any consequences, if he did do anything. And he was also just a profuse liar. So anytime I would threaten him with telling the parents, he would just say, "Go ahead, I'll just lie." And I remember being a little bit older, and this is another memory that stuck with me like so vividly. At some point, I don't even think I was part of it, but my brother was lying to my dad about something, and my dad said something to the effect of, "Stacy, you lie so much that you don't even know when you're telling the truth." And I remember being like 8 or something, and that hit me as like one of the most profound things I'd ever heard, because he was so invested in his lies that he convinced himself of it. So I was dealing with gaslighting, with the abuse. I had no out. I had no protection. I just had to deal with it. And then I was with him all the time because my mom and dad were both busy with stuff. So that was in my younger years. And then when I was 14 or so, I think late middle school or early high school. Maybe I was even like 15 or 16. I'd gone out with friends on a weekend and came home. I had to be home by like before midnight. So I come home, my parents are in bed, and him and his friend are in the living room watching a show, and his friend was the person I was friends with. So I lay on the floor because they're on the couch and the chair. So I lay on the floor and I'm watching whatever they're watching with them. And then they decide to go to bed. So he gets up, he turns the TV off, and then his friend walks past me and goes upstairs, and he stops and he puts his foot on my chest. So I push it off. So he stomps on my chest harder. So I push it off again, and he says, ask me to take it off. So I was like, fuck you. I'm not going to ask you to take your foot off. So he stomps harder. So I was like, stop fucking, I'm cursing at him. So he gets down on top of me. And again, I've always been a slight build. He's considerably larger than me. He had his knees on my arms. At the time, I had braces. And also him and his friend chew tobacco. So he had a cup full of spit from like hours of watching TV and spitting into it. So at one point, he starts to pour tobacco spit onto my face. My arms are pinned down. I can't stop it. It's pouring over my face. But I start cursing at him more, and he starts pummeling my face. So my arms are pinned down. I have braces. So my face is covered in tobacco spit, and it's ripping my lip open. So my mouth is getting bloodied. And then I'm gasping for breath, and I have tobacco spit coming into my mouth, mixing with the blood.
Oh.
So I wouldn't relent. So eventually he got tired of pummeling me, I guess, and eventually got off of me. So I go into the bathroom, and I turn the shower on to over to wash my head off. And apparently he had like a slight twinge of guilt for some idiotic reason. So he comes in and tries to help me. So I stand up and I push him away. He's like, the fuck away from me. What the fuck's wrong with you? And then he swings and punches me again in the face.
Yeah. That sounds, I mean, obviously I'm not a doctor or a psychologist, but that sounds a lot like narcissistic personality disorder, especially when you're talking about he believes his own lies. That's like,
yeah, I was
classic.
thinking the same thing.
And we actually have a question from the chat.
Yes, we do. Richard just asked, how old are you and your brother currently?
I'm currently 48, so I guess that puts my brother at around 50, but I haven't been in communication with him for years, so not really sure.
I can't say I can't say I really blame you for that. You mentioned that you have children, and I wouldn't want someone like him around my kids either.
Oh, hell no.
No.
That reminds me of one of my mom's uncles, and that I'm thankful that I don't remember him. I don't know if I've ever actually met him in person. But let's just say that he was locked up in a psych ward for everybody's protection. And whenever his time was about to come up, family members would go and, to the hospital and be like, no, you can't let him go. He's too violent and he's too extreme. So I couldn't imagine bringing your kids around a guy like what your brother's like.
Yeah, no, it absolutely wouldn't happen. We actually surprised our parents with their 50th wedding anniversary a couple of years ago. We didn't even invite him. He wasn't even allowed to show up. Me and my other 3 siblings organized it from across the country, and he lives in the same town as them, and he wasn't even invited to attend because he's such a... So in fact, that I said that kind of bookended things, because the first instance was 4 and the other instance was between 14 and 16.
Right.
I won't say it gets worse, but so when I was in college, I was dating somebody who I might have even been engaged to at the time, and I was kind of trying to look past it and think, okay, let's get past that. He was young, he was an asshole. I want to get over it. I want to move on. I wasn't exactly friendly, or we weren't cordial, but I just kind of was trying to let go of it. So one time I was home at my parents' house. I was in college, about 45 minutes away, and my partner at the time was with me. And she and I and my younger were in the family computer room. And for some reason, my younger brother and the older brother, the abusive one, got in some argument over something to do with the computer. And they're both super hard-headed. They're both complete pain in the asses with how sure of themselves they are. So they can't let anything go. So they're arguing over just like a stupid little question of how to do something on Windows or something. It's completely inconsequential to anybody's life. And as my older brother's walking out of the room, my younger brother says something to him in passing. Well, that's just idiotic on my younger brother, because of course the older brother's not going to let it go. So he goes out, and by the way, he was day drinking. You know, it was like a holiday, Thanksgiving or something. So he was drunk by like 2 or 3 o'clock. So he comes back in red-faced, and he's yelling at my brother about this whatever the stupid issue was. I'm trying to get my younger brother to let it go. He turns to walk. My younger brother says something again as he's walking out the door. So he turns and charges into the room. And my younger brother leans back on the bed he was on. He was sitting next to my partner. He kind of ducked behind her. My older brother plowed over my partner to get to my younger brother. She didn't get injured, thankfully. But he ended up on top of my younger brother, had his hands on his throat. He was choking him. So I jump up out of the computer chair. I grab him by the shoulder, and I throw him off of my younger brother. Both my partner and my younger brother flee the room, and I'm just standing there. And he stands up, and he's huffing and red-faced, like looking like demonic in my face. And I'm just standing there looking at him. I was wearing glasses at the time. And he's just huffing and staring at me. And I don't know, I think I was like, what? And he punched me, shattered my glasses, and gave me a black eye. So I had to return to college with broken glasses and a black eye. So those were the sort of things that I dealt with without being protected from my parents and without any kind of like emotional support for any kind of issues growing up in addition to that. So that's why the complex PTSD and the CEM makes sense of why I have so many kind of deep-seated psycho-emotional issues.
Right, and then when you're talking about in the pre-show as well, you know that you're married, and what your life was like, and just what kind of, I mean, honestly, you're this is where I really started to relate a lot with you. Was with my my first marriage, like you, I was like, I'll work as much work as that needs to be done in order to take care of the family. That means if I have to do 20 to 40 hours of overtime every week, so be it. As long as my family's taken care of, everybody's happy, we all still love each other, et cetera, et cetera. And your story kind of resonated with that with me. So if you wanted to go into a little bit about that, 'cause
Sure. Like in respect to the CPTSD, you mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, kind of set up the story about like what you did for your family, the struggles that you were going through. Because I mean, at this point, you had said that you hadn't been diagnosed. It hadn't discovered the book yet, so you were still struggling with issues that you didn't even know what they were. I mean, obviously, you knew you had something. Right. But you didn't know if it was normal, abnormal, or what, obviously.
Yeah, I'd been diagnosed with anxiety years before, but, you know, I never felt like that really, you know, I have, my anxiety manifests itself in like panic attacks, but it's not thought process. It's more corporeal. It's like in my chest, just kind of out of the blue. I'm not like, I'm not like sitting dwelling on something. Just kind of out of the blue, I'll start to get short of breath, you know, pain in my chest. It often happens at nighttime. I'm trying to sleep. I struggle with insomnia my entire life, which I'm sure is related to the CPTSD. So there were many nights.
You get the anxiety. You get the anxiety attacks that feel like a heart attack.
Yeah, like many a night, especially before I was diagnosed with anxiety, where I was laying in bed, and the heart starts racing. I'm starting to get short of breath. My chest is aching, and I was like in my early 30s, and I'm like, I think I'm having a heart attack. And there were many nights where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to live through the night, and I don't know if I can go to the hospital. So I'd kind of gone on different meds, but I was really reluctant to get on SSRIs because of doing the research around how much people coming off of SSRIs, suicide rates are really high. And I didn't really want to get stuck with having to take SSRIs the rest of my life. So I did take Klonopin. So I had a benzo. And I was really reluctant to take it because I struggle with alcohol addiction issues. And I knew that addiction was a risk. So I would only take it a couple times a week, and it was usually at those times of laying in bed and thinking that I might have a heart attack, and then I would take it. So my wife and I were both teachers in Philadelphia, so extremely stressful situations where the schools are underfunded, the kids have really extreme educational and psycho-emotional needs, very taxing, and then we're raising 2 kids in the city. And then on top of that, she doesn't drive, and I hate driving. One of my CPTSD issues is road rage. But I would have to drive both of my daughters to their schools, 2 different schools, and then drive my wife to work. And then go to school, and then go and pick everybody back up, and then return them home. And then I tutored in the wealthy suburbs around Philadelphia, doing test prep. So I would then have to turn around, maybe get like a quick bite in, maybe like a granola bar, and drive 45 minutes into the suburbs trying to deal with all the stress from the day of teaching, and then deal with more road rage issues driving through terrible traffic in the suburbs, and then have to go into a mansion and do test prep with some wealthy kid, and then turn around and come back and that was part of where that alcohol addiction came from, is because I was doing as much around the house as my wife was in terms of cooking, cleaning, helping with the girls, putting them to bed, laundry, and all that. And then I have chronic back pain, which I'm sure is related to the CPTSD too. So I was constantly just burning I make the joke that I was burning the candle at all 10 ends. Felt like I was wearing myself down from every possible direction simultaneously. And so there were times where, like, say my wife would start the laundry, and then it would be like spread all out around the living room and not put away, and come home and just be like, can you put this away? Things like that, or the kitchen being a mess. And like, I've worked all day, I've done this tutoring, and now it's like chaos around here. And one of my triggers that I've come to realize is not having my voice heard, which is what the case was with my parents and the abuse from my brother. And so 1 or 2 times of making the same point of like, this really bothers me. Can you just not leave like dishes full of food out on the counter? So if I come to the kitchen and want to do something, I don't have to clean up the stuff you left, etc. So there were times where if it was just a particularly raw day, and then I'd already talked about the same issue on several occasions, sometimes then I would snap and I would get angry and say harsh things. And it would go both ways. We would both raise our voices and say regretful stuff. So then I would cool down, and I would try to look back and think about how I got to that point. And so I would try to break it down for her and say, I'm really terribly sorry. Like, I should never use that language with you. I don't really feel those things about you. But here's the thing is, I was doing all these things. My back's killing me. I'm anxiety ridden, and this is the same thing I've asked you about several times, and it seems like you're just not trying to hear what my concerns are, but I wasn't getting anything like that in return. She wasn't saying, well, I'm sorry for the things that I said. She would say that I was worthless and things that would also kind of hit some triggers, and I wouldn't get that kind of reciprocal stuff of that. She didn't really hold those things to be true also. So it just kind of sat in the core of my heart. And I just tried to bite my lip and swallow it, because I felt like the best thing for our daughters was for us to be together, as long as we weren't fighting around them much, and we were able to provide them as much stability and love as we could. And for the most part, things were fine. And our girls are 9 and 5. They're very healthy. They're very successful in school. They're socially adept. They're emotionally stable. I'm actually kind of stunned that we've been able to do for our girls what we've been able to do, because we didn't really have any family or friends around to help us rear the girls while we were working these stressful jobs and living in a stressful city. So I was willing to just kind of take it until one night when my soon to be ex, I guess, snapped on me because I forgot that she had told me that she didn't need me to pick her up from school. And so when I did show up and got her attention in her classroom because she wasn't responding to her phone, she came out to the parking lot and screamed and cursed at me and called me all kinds of demeaning things. I was like, I just don't see how we can move forward, because she somehow sees all of our issues as being completely on my hands and isn't willing to see that they're being co-created, and that this hurtful language she keeps using, which I've had told her on several occasions, was harming me in a deep way, would never, she would just kind of downplay it and say, oh, come on. Never say, I can understand why that'd be hurtful, and I don't really think those things, and I want to work past this. Things like that. So
people forget that words have power, and they can do a lot. I mean,
they can do so much damage.
Yeah, look at cyberbullying. People get pushed to suicide over words.
Yeah.
Bexy definitely has suffered a lot over words.
Yes, definitely. And I definitely know the feeling of never feeling like your thoughts and emotions and feelings are valid in the eyes of others.
Yeah.
It's very harsh. It's very hard to deal with. I mean, I can definitely relate and understand where you're coming from on that.
And I can only imagine, based on how you were neglected as a child, that when you start getting these kinds of behaviors, not only from your brother, but you're also getting it now from your spouse, that it's got to play on your own mental health. On, am I actually the problem? Is it really just me? Am I really that broken?
Right.
I wouldn't be surprised if you had those thoughts. I know I would.
Yeah, and it made me willing to just bite my lip and take it, which is really unhealthy too, because it was just something that I.
Oh yeah.
So it was such a trigger, because it hit on this deep-seated of lack of self-worth, that started in those earliest years, and that I wasn't worth feeling loved and safe and protected. So that's definitely made it all the more damaging. If I didn't have those concerns and worries and thoughts already, it wouldn't have been as damaging as it was, but that was already a weak point for me.
Yeah, it's kind of like, if you ever watch like MMA or even boxing or even wrestling, as fake as it is, they always take advantage of the one weak spot. Like Conor McGregor, he just got whooped because the guy kept kicking him in the thigh or in the calf over and over and over again, making it so his plant leg for his powerful punches was a weak point. You just keep drilling at it, and it has a major impact. Like I said, same with words. If you're hitting the same spot over and over and over again, yeah, it's going to get thinner and thinner until it snaps.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I don't really know you very well. You know, we've only talked a couple of times now, and we had just a little back and forth beforehand. But honestly, I think the best thing for you is that you are away from, you know, your spouse, like you said, soon to be ex. And honestly, I think that's a good thing. I think it's good for your children because they can now see, hey, you can leave bad situations and make yourself better and become happier. I'm divorced, and I wanted my kids to see, look, I didn't, my wife left me, but it was the best thing that happened to me.
Yeah.
Because now I'm happier. My kids see I'm happier. I'm remarried. So yeah, my kids could see, yeah, you don't have to be stuck in a bad situation. That is so unhealthy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, absolutely. It was kind of a relief because I felt like I was carrying so much burden for the family, and not being appreciated for it, and then still being verbally abused. And
I was gonna say, not only were you carrying such a heavy load, but then you have all of this, emotional and verbal abuse going on, and it begins to make you feel like you yourself are the burden, are the problem.
Yeah.
And I mean, you worked a full-time job. And let's face it, teaching is more than a full-time job. I've never met a teacher that just did their 40 hours a week and that was it.
Neither have I.
Yeah, that just doesn't happen. And I'm pretty sure that you're in that same boat. So you're working a job and a half with that, plus you're adding in tutoring, plus you're completely all the transport. I assume that you had very little time with your daughters, let alone your spouse, and then have to come home and do half of the chores on top of that. I mean,
yeah,
that's just not fair.
It's a lot to have to deal with.
Yeah. And then having the chronic pain, that's just completely wears on you through the day. So this back pain is getting worse and worse and worse. So then I get home and all I could do is lay on an ice pack on the couch. And then, she would be upset that I just kind of wanted to read stuff, browse Reddit or read a book or something, and was, upset that I wasn't, always engaged with the family at those times. I was just like completely spent by that point, on the weekends. And when I wasn't tutoring, I'd take the girls out. We hike all the time. I was a big skateboarder, like I mentioned. I had my 9-year-old skating. By the time she was 6, I'd take her out.
Nice.
Skateboard with her and stuff like that. Yeah. So I've always been as active as I possibly could be with the girls. I absolutely adore them to no end and very involved father. But some of those days midweek where the teaching in a difficult school, and then the tutoring with the driving all over the city, and then the back pain, and by the end of the day I wasn't worth a damn. I was just needed to lay on an ice pack and let my brain just kind of melt away.
Yeah, you were getting yourself a little recharge to push through the end of the night, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to be able to take a break now and then and recharge, especially if you're like, get up and you're just go. Get the kids to school, get your wife to school, go to school, your own school, for the full day. Go pick everybody up, bring everybody home, possibly have to take your kids to any extracurriculars, plus drive out to the suburbs, do your tutoring, drive back. That is a very, very full day.
Yeah. Yeah, totally taxing. So I go back and forth because it's been a little over a year now since we first separated. I guess it's been near a year and a half. And I miss my daughters to no end. I have them most weekends. So oftentimes I'm just going 5 days without them, and I'm teaching and busy and stuff. So it still hurts to not have them here with me in the evenings. But on the flip side, it was honestly when she decided to move with the girls to her parents. They're an hour away, so it's not terribly far. It's not hard for us to meet halfway and exchange them. It was a relief. And then on top of that, I knew I'd already been spending, I want to say about 2 years really working on my mental health. So I'd been making a regular practice of journaling. I'd been trying to do mindfulness meditation on a daily basis. I do yoga for my back issues, not very frequently. I wanted to do it at least weekly, but it probably came out to more like once a month. But I'd been in and out of therapy, so I was trying to do my best to figure things out. And I talked to her often about knowing, that I needed to address the anger issues, knowing that I needed to deal with the alcohol addiction issues, and I was making steps. I would get up at 4:45 in the morning, in fact, so I could journal and meditate before school. And what's so frustrating is I felt like I was like make headway, and then we just kind of had like a final blowout fight that was really bad. And that's when she made the decision, and I was kind of relieved.
Right. And I mean, honestly, like I look back, I've been divorced now 12 years, 13 years, something like that. It's been a long time. And I understand why she left me, because I was in a very bad space emotionally and mentally myself. And, like you said, you get into those fights, awful things are said, things that,
yeah.
I mean, you just, once it leaves your lips, you can't take it back.
Right.
And it's like, I don't blame her for leaving me, but I hate that it happened because it shattered my family, my identity. We had the 2 kids. We lived in a 3-bedroom condo, so both kids had their own room. And then to go from being able to see my kids and put them to bed every single night to I get them once a week. I got them for the week, but I only got them once a week. Oh man, that just it was so painful, and it tore at me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, as you said, it was a blessing because that week I didn't have my kids. I was able to focus on me and get myself healthier. And as terrible as it may sound initially, it was a blessing that I didn't have my kids as often as I did. But it allowed me to be a better person and give even higher quality time to my kids when I had them. And I think that's irreplaceable.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you this, and see if we can commiserate on another issue here.
All right.
So one thing that I realized for me is, first of all, like I studied child development. I worked in preschools and daycares. I've always like really connected with little kids and wanted to work in education and help kids develop and become healthy adults. So I've completely reveled in the role of being a dad to my kids. But what's funny is, in a way, it's also was and still is a type of dissociation for me, because I can so throw myself into the role of being a dad and having fun with them and taking them hiking and skateboarding with them and wrestling with them and exploring and just doing all the stuff I loved as a kid and that I want them to be able to do as kids. But in a way, it's always an escape where it allowed me to completely shut out my own issues and not have to face them, which in a way was unhealthy. It's healthy to be a great father and to try to do what my parents didn't do for me. But when I gave myself completely to that and to the marriage and to all the tasks, it was a way to free me up from having to face all the pain and the issues that I had, that I should have been dealing with all along. Do you feel like that was the case for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And it got to the point where I would take walks by myself in the evenings, just like a half hour, 45-minute walk. And the entire time, You know, it's like after I got out of the house, there were suicidal thoughts the entire time for me because I hadn't been facing my issues. But I'd get back to the house and it'd be like, okay, time to switch back onto dad mode. Let's bury E deep down inside and let's go for, you know, let's put on the dad mask. But after the divorce, I was able to address a lot of my stuff. And as my kids got older, one of the things that I did, and this works for some people, doesn't work for all parents because everybody's different. Every relationship with their kids are different. But with my kids, I made it very clear. I prefer the friend hat. Dad hat comes first. Dad always comes first. But if you're doing what you're supposed to do, and I don't have to keep reminding you, I don't have to, you're not like, you know, pissing me off because it's like, look, I've asked you to take out the garbage 3 times and it's still not going out. What the hell? You know, it's like, I could be a friend. I could be someone you could confide into. I'm not going to share your secrets. And we could have a lot of fun. We could have a really awesome, rewarding relationship. But gotta understand, there's that line where you cross it, the dad hat comes on, and man, I hate wearing that hat. So I'm going to make sure you understand how much I hate it. And it worked really well for me. Like my oldest actually called me up just before his daughter was born. He called me up and he was just completely distraught, wanting to know how to foster that relationship because he is so scared of being locked out of his daughter's life when she becomes a teenager. I'm like, this is so sweet. She's not even born yet. This is so far down the road. But
that's awesome.
It was awesome that he came to me for that, you know. It tells me that what I did for him, I think it worked well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I hope that you get to share that kind of a story too.
Yeah. Yeah, I have really, really strong relationship with the girls, and you know, there's times where I get like that anxiety of they're like going, you know, my 9-year-old is kind of turning into a big kid with me not being around all the time, and that's kind of been heartbreaking, and I get those twinges of fears of her, like, you know, becoming a teen and being too cool for dad and all. So there's times where that kind of weighs on me, you know, not being around, but I constantly am have that sense that they still feel really emotionally connected and everything, right. You know, each time I'm with them. So,
and that is really important to have.
I'm sure that'll. Yeah, it's like of the utmost importance to me.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, my kids,
they're absolutely,
you know, my kids, they have their issues. Some of the demons that I had, I wasn't able to defeat, and they got passed on, unfortunately. I mean, and it's just one of those things where I'm trying to help break the cycle. Like my dad, as we talked before, he kind of had that relationship, you know, from the greatest generation, where it was, dad comes home from work, mom gives the report on which kids need to get beat. So that's what my dad had to deal with. Never heard the words "I love you" from his parents, where I heard it all the time from my parents, and my dad did the best he could. But, you know, he didn't have anyone to role model after to be better than what he was capable of doing. But as far as I'm concerned, he did an absolutely fantastic job. And so I'm doing the same with my kids. You know, I'm trying to take it the next step, in the hopes that my kids could take it to the next step, and that our own personal demons that do get passed on become fewer and fewer and fewer. And those that do get passed on are also weaker and weaker and weaker. That way, it doesn't slide back, because all it takes is one part of that, one of the children, one of my progeny, to go ahead and backslide, and the whole thing starts over again.
Yeah, I've had the exact same thought, because, like I said, both of my parents had gone through trauma growing up, and they gave us such a considerably better life than you know, they had growing up. And like at one point, my mom drinks quite a bit, pretty regularly. At one point, it was buzzed, and I was home, and she was getting really emotional, and she said, you and Andrea, you're such better parents than we ever were for you. And she felt so bad. And I was like, please don't ever say that. Like, you were such extraordinarily good parents. And, there's things that could have been different and all, but it was, so much better what you did than what you had. And that's what I want you to remember, that you gave us everything you could. And it was a huge, huge step forward from what you experienced. And that's what I'm trying to do too. Like you said, push that on. And I definitely have worries when I see my 9-year-old, especially. She's like a mini me. When I see her like similar symptoms of anxiety and think about, some of the issues, just her seeing the handful of times that her mom and I did fight around her and things like that. It really makes me anxious about whether it's, affecting her currently.
And it's absolutely,
how much she.
And I hate to say it, but it's true. It's absolutely fucking heartbreaking seeing your kids suffer any kind of emotional stress that you have. Like, my kids both have anxiety, my older ones. And I know that they got it from me. Because my ex, I don't know that she necessarily even suffered from anxiety. My current wife, yeah. It's one of the things that we actually bonded over. But, no, it's just, it's heart-wrenching when you see your own kids suffering.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, the good news is, it sounds like you have a really tight bond with your kids. You take them out and do things, and you're having fun. You're building memories. You have a good emotional connection. I don't think they're going to suffer from the childhood emotional neglect. I think that you beat that demon.
That's true. That's true.
So congratulations on slaying that beast.
Thank you. And I made it. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. And I made it very clear when Amelia when Annalise, our younger daughter, was born. I made it very clear to Amelia that, like, being a big sibling is a really, really special thing. And that, I wanted her to think of herself as the best big sister in the world. And she's just been absolutely fabulous as a big sister to her sister. The only problem is I think I oversold it too much to where she puts too much pressure on herself. If her little sister's not listening to her, it makes her anxious. So I've tried to counterbalance that with saying, that it's not her fault if her sister's not listening. What's important is that she tries to care for her sister. And she's been 1,000 times better of an older sibling than mine was, or even I was to my younger siblings.
And I only have one younger sibling. I don't have any older siblings. The relationship could have been better, but as of now, I mean, we're super tight. She's one of my best friends, which is really nice.
That's great.
No, I wasn't the best big brother. I was an ass. But I absolutely got furious if anybody else was an ass to her. It's like, that's my sister. I'm the one that gets to be the jerk, not you. Which, not the healthiest attitude, but it's not the worst either, I guess. I don't know.
I think it came from it might not be the best attitude, but I think it was done out of love for your sister. So.
Oh yeah, I never not loved her. I missed that last part. My headphones decided to give up for a second.
I just giggled. So.
So, anybody have any questions for Andy? Because we went through quite a bit.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. One more thing to celebrate. You're sober.
Yes. Yeah. After a long, decades-long sojourn.
Yeah, it's like
a big step.
Not gonna lie, because we had the pre-show during my birthday, and I got my mini fridge. I'm like, yes, I have a beer left. And you're like, yeah, and I just, I've been sober for a little while. I'm like, okay, I'll have to drink you later. Because I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to drink in front of you on the screen. Be like, oh, so you're sober now, drink a beer. No.
Let's have a drink of that.
Actually, I FaceTimed Bexy afterwards, and I was like, this was me. Like, I pulled the beer up with a little smirk, and then like, oh yeah, and I'm sober now. And I just blank face, slowly moved the bottle out of frame.
Well, the funny thing is your tea bottle looked awful lot like a Jack bottle. I was like, is he slugging whiskey?
No, that was
that was
Tehava.
Yeah.
I'm a rum guy myself.
I realized it later, but I was like, all right, kudos. straight from the fifth.
I mean, I don't...
That kind of guy.
I don't mind whiskey, but I mean, like, it's... Like, I can't drink Jack. I just can't. It's just... Ugh. I need the higher quality, and it's got to be freaking cold for me to be able to actually drink it without shuddering. Ooh, we got a good question.
Oh. Yes. Kat asks, the incident with your brother where he broke your glasses, was that the last one, or did you have further confrontations?
Oh, God. Well, no, just a couple of years back, my wife and my daughters and I were back for Thanksgiving, and our cousin was there, who was a younger cousin, and me and my dad and my older brother and my cousin were in watching a college football game, and they got in some completely inane verbal disagreement, and my older brother had to keep on escalating it. And here, this is like our younger cousin. He is like our baby cousin. Of course, we're all grown adults now, but it was some petty bullshit, and he kept on escalating it. And I was like, I don't even remember what I said, but it was something pretty innocuous. But I was like, all right, guys, let's just let it go. And then again, because he's a narcissistic asshole, he started going into volcanic rage. And my younger brother was in the other room, and I think ever since I saved him from being choked, has been ready to have some retribution. So he came running in from the other room and put him back in the chair. And I don't know. It wasn't really like a fight, but he kind of like pinned him down. But he probably would have attacked me had my younger brother not come in and put him in his place. So that was a kind of semi-incident, and that was a couple years back now, 2 or 3 Thanksgivings ago.
Always Thanksgiving.
That was the last. Yeah.
And if it's not Thanksgiving, it's Christmas.
Well, all right. It's any time with him because he's always day drinking and ready to go into a rage.
Oof.
Yeah, I can't say that I blame you one bit for not having anything to do with him anymore.
And I can't blame you one bit for not inviting him to your parents' 50th anniversary. Because I can only imagine that would be a really almost guaranteed way to ruin it, based on what we've been hearing.
Oh, yeah. Guaranteed. Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking because, he was the first person I really looked up to. And really, he was my first friend and everything. So it's definitely part of that deep-seated sense of distrust and a deep-seated emotional pain to have that happen with the first person that I was deeply connected to as kind of a peer and a friend and a brother. Very, very sad.
Yeah, and Kat also...
That's probably enough pain and
like
suffering for me to discount.
Yeah,
Sorry,
Kat says it sounds like he's not gotten the help he needs, but she's glad you did.
Yeah, we tried to get him help, but he won't do it.
Now, it's like they say, you can lead a horse to water.
Right.
And I responded in the chat saying it sounds like he wouldn't consider himself needing help, which is pretty classic in narcissistic personality disorder.
That's right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. All right. Probably good place to wrap it up.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we're kind of dying here. I mean, thank you very much for sharing. Like seriously, like I said before, there's a lot of things that you talked about with your life and your marriage. I mean, there's a resonance there.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of things that resonated with me as well.
Yeah. If you're on Facebook, go ahead and give us a follow. Facebook.com/mentallivecast.
Yeah, I'm not on there.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I'll follow the website. I got the website loaded up, so I'll have to follow the live episodes.
Yeah, and also
from here on out.
Yep. If you're, we do have an official website, just mimental.net, but it doesn't notify when we go live. I need to work on it again. There's a lot of work I need to do. Like if you look at it, it only shows a couple of seasons, and yeah, we're in season 4 right now. I have some updating to do. I'm wanting to create a mailing list so that way when we're about to go live, I can just send an email blast out or SMS, like text blast out. I want to put up forums so the discussions could go beyond just the episodes. There's a lot of things I want to do. It's just getting it done and finding time, especially now that I'm working full time again. But we'll make it work.
Yeah, it's a great idea, like that you have the live interaction with listeners. So I'd love to be a listener and interact with future guests on the show.
Oh, absolutely. We'd love to have you. Just
that would be awesome.
Yeah, Spreaker.com. Sign up for the free account. They're not going to spam you. They're not going to sell your information. That's a major part why I picked Spreaker. And then when we go live, we're live every Thursday at the same time. Feel free to just jump on in and you sign in with your account, and then at the bottom, like whether you're on your phone or the computer, there's like a little mini player at the bottom. You tap on it and it'll bring up the chat, or click on it and bring up the chat.
Okay,
and you're in.
Yep.
Sounds good.
So yeah,
again, if anybody's wondering about the book that Andy mentioned about the complex PTSD, I did drop a link for it in the chat. I found it on Amazon, so I went ahead and copied that and dropped it in the chat.
What was funny is I was composing the same message when you dropped it, and I was like, she beat me to it. Yeah, then when we were talking about other parts,
like I said,
I'll go for it.
Sorry, I was just going to say, your local library might offer you a free Hoopla account, and they have the audiobook on there. So for me, while I was walking the dog and listening to it, was like a great time to really chew on it and work through the concepts. And then let me mention one other book, the Childhood Emotional Neglect, which was really the first breakthrough. The book that was the groundbreaking text for that is called Running on Empty. And the author's name is Jonice Webb, Jonice Webb.
And I'm sure Bexy's already hunting it down to throw it in the chat.
I've already got the link. Yeah. I'm about to copy it and drop it.
See?
Nice. That one's profound, and I think a lot of us in the United States suffer from childhood emotional neglect because our parents' generation didn't really know about kids' emotional needs, and a lot of like tough love and approaches they brought to the table were very emotionally neglectful in many cases. So I think it's a pretty wide study, to be honest.
I mean, it was the whole thing, especially if you're male, suck it up. You want to,
right.
You're crying. You wanted me to give you a reason to cry? Stuff like that. I mean, just.
Oh yeah, I heard that a lot.
Exactly.
My mother's favorite was "Children should be seen and not heard. Go away."
Ugh.
Oh Jesus, horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hopefully we get the word out to people. I'm going to keep on spreading spreading the word, and I'll also share your podcast and try to get other people on
thank
here.
you. Appreciate that.
That is so awesome.
It's important.
Yeah, and definitely would love to see you in the chat. Maybe we could have you back on again sometime. Would love to do that. Yeah, definitely keep in touch.
Sounds good.
I like you, dude.
All right. Well,
Definitely. It was a pleasure to meet you and to hear your story, and thank you for sharing.
Yeah, we really appreciate you getting your story out.
Yeah, Kat says thank you, Andy.
you're welcome, Kat. You're welcome, Bexy. You're welcome, E. Nice to meet you all, and I appreciate the time and your sympathetic ear.
Oh, absolutely. And so for everybody else, we'll be back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. I'm E.
And I'm Bexy.
See you next week.
Bye, guys.
But now do you see?